Next from Champaign, we talked to Doctors Robert Good and Rashid Bashir about a new school that will be built at the University of Illinois that they say will revolutionize the teaching of medicine. This runs about 10 minutes.
Dr. Robert Good and Dr. Bashir, thank you for joining us on the Illinois channel. And so you are both critically involved in a new medical school that what was said earlier in the evening as we tape this is going to kind of revolutionize the teaching of medicine. Can you give us a thumbnail sketch? Let me start, Dr. Bashir, if you can. What is different about what is being created?
So what we intend to do here is to integrate engineering and quantitative sciences into the medical curriculum alongside with basic sciences and the clinical sciences. So really we'll have these three pillars: the basics, the biological scences, clinical sciences, and the engineering sciences, and integrate them really into the curriculum all the way across to be able to produce scenarios where there's quantitative solutions to the problems that are faced by the healthcare system today. So we want to produce the physician leaders, the physician innovators of tomorrow, who are great physicians, but then also are doing the problem solving of making the system better to provide a higher quality healthcare to more people at lower cost.
Let me ask you, we hear about the mapping of the human genome. We've heard medicine before, or up to this point, has been kind of a one-size-fits-all. I'm paraphrasing here, but to what extent is medicine going to be changing now that we can maybe target a cure to the individual once we know what their biological makeup is, because we have that new technology? And to what extent is what you're doing here based somewhat on seeing where medicine is going? Is that a fair representation, or am I misrepresenting?
Well, healthcare's got to change. What we're doing is very individualized. The future of medicine will evolve more around population health, team-based healthcare. It requires physicians to work with multiple multidisciplinary teams in order to help improve the care of the patient. And that may involve some, as you mentioned, genetics. But we have to understand the ethics behind that and the professional development, because it's not without some risk. So what we're trying to do in this educational model is to integrate the knowledge of engineering and the skills of engineers along with the core knowledge and compassion and health care that we serve as physicians. And I think that's what's unique about this. We have the opportunity to create not only new things, new stuff, but new ways of doing things, new processes, and new ways to help people. By doing that, we can expand some of our health care out to rural America. Right now, one of the highest risks that a patient can have is living in rural America. It's higher than many of the other demographics.
And why is that?
Well, I think we just have we have an environment in which in rural America there's not as many healthcare providers. The technology is not as great in rural, and the access is decreasing. So we have to look at different ways in which we can help provide that access in a very high level of healthcare.
I often, when someone comes up with something new, there has been a lot of thought before it goes into effect, and they're trying to fix a problem, trying to fill a void. What's the void that or the problem you're trying to fix that this is going to do different and be better than what's currently being done?
So I think, again, coming back to this sort of a slogan or mantra we've been using, I think we need to be thinking about how can we use technology to provide a higher level of access, like Bob said, more access. So access is one thing, and we really believe that's a void. So in rural America, in many parts of the U.S., around the world. So access is one thing, and we believe a very thoughtful, integrated way of thinking about how to get technology and medicine together will help with that. Lowering the cost, and that's a very complicated problem. But again, we think a systems engineering perspective of the whole healthcare system. And again, Carl is a terrific partner for this, because Carl is a healthcare system in terms of owning the insurance and the hospital and the healthcare delivery. So thinking about how do you reduce cost for the whole system across the board, right? And then the idea of then higher quality. I mean, still being able to provide quality. So, I mean, an analogy you might think about, again, it's not, I know it's not, it's apples and oranges, but electronics, you have a higher quality product coming out every generation or so. That's actually most of the time it's cheaper, and it's being used by more and more people around the world. So, how can we do that in healthcare, perhaps in targeted areas? New sensors, new devices, new telemedicine, new ways of prevention. How can we use technology to help do that? And the right integration, the appropriate, thoughtful integration of technology into different industries, has lower costs, has provided more access. So healthcare is one of the grand challenges of today, and how can we think about doing it better?
We may not know what some of those solutions are until we know what the problem is. So, I'll take an example of a pharmacist in Florida that had a child die in a hot, overheated car, and who's upset. He comes home, he's talking to his neighbor over the fence, and the neighbor is an engineer. They develop a sensor to put under the car seat, so if you can't get out of the car door without, the mother couldn't get out of the car door without an alarm going off or without her cell phone ringing. So it's a simple solution. If it saves 5 children out of the 30 that died last year, that's a big deal. And
Every time I hear one of those, it's just an unnecessary death. And yeah, if you can come up with some simple solution.
And it doesn't have to take very long for a child in a 120-degree car for a bad event to happen. There are little things like that happening all around the world. It doesn't necessarily take a great solution, but it takes somebody to think about that. And that's what engineers can help provide to a medical environment. Some of the same problems that my forefathers dealt with in medicine, I'm still dealing with today. And maybe they've got some solutions so that I can move on. I can provide care to more people in a different way.
So are you teaching someone to be both a doctor and somewhat of an engineer, or having a doctor be able to work with someone who's an engineer?
I think if you know the basis of engineering better, I think there's more that you can do. We're not trying to make graduate engineers out of our physicians, but the physicians who know that there's a capacity out there can then turn to engineering and to research and know how to go down that road. And our students will be involved in research projects throughout this process. We are encouraging that highly. In fact, we're requiring that they get involved in idea-type projects where they're coming up with potential solutions that maybe have to be delved in deeper.
Before we close out, so where are we as we tape this on the 8th of September? What's the timeline? When does the school open? I think was it today you just announced your dean for the school?
The inaugural dean position was approved by the Board of Trustees today. The timeline is for us to submit the LCME accreditation material for the college by December. And then there will be a series of events after that. The current plan is to have the first class in fall 2018, which means we have to recruit in fall 2017. So about a year from now, we should be recruiting students for a class that starts the year after.
And is this going to be in a new building? Is it an existing building? And where will that be located?
So we are going to, in the long term, the plan is to use the current medical science building on campus as the headquarters for the College of Medicine, but then have it integrated across engineering and, of course, across Carl. So we see this as sort of students will be moving through the medical science building, the Everett lab, which will be the home of bioengineering, and Carl, of course, as the main clinical partner across those 3 sites.
Well, gentlemen, we appreciate you looking ahead, and who knows, this might be, hopefully it's as revolutionary and promising as we all hope. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.